which is a large collection of plates, spicy, and it was marvelous. Because all my Dutch family would eat potatoes and meat. And groente. Groente is a vegetable. And then I got to know Indos. I was in The Hague in a church, and there were many there. They lived there. There were memorials to the Indonesian experience of the Netherlands. And there were Indos I met in Montreal. They had also survived a concentration camp like Dodi has in the time of World War II in Indonesia. One gentleman was a teenager, 13, 12, and living in those horrific conditions, as Dodi was. And so it really is wonderful to read her story and read this book about her, Theodora, and the beautiful picture of this lady from Indonesia. And I'm sure she would prefer to be in Indonesia right now on this cold winter evening. It's much warmer down there in that tropical place. So yeah, her story was just fascinating to sit down and talk and realize that she had this whole Indonesian chapter, a Dutch chapter, and then an American chapter. So it encompasses a wide range, and just fascinating by that. The Netherlands is deeply impacted by its Indonesian experience. I know that not immediately, but over time, learning more and more about it. Even here in our community, we have someone who fought there in the Dutch army when they were battling. And Dodi's story, very interestingly, talks about post-war, the Indonesian nationalists not liking her Dutch blood. See, the Japanese didn't like her Dutch blood because there was the colonial blood. So if you were of too much of an Indonesian Dutch extraction, you got into the camp. So I want them to go on and delve into the depths of this story, and I would like to open with prayer, if you don't mind, being the chaplain. Dear Lord, thank you very much for the opportunity Dodi had to put her story into writing with her co-author, Laura Lee Cracker, and we pray that you may bless this evening. We thank you for her faith, which shines through the pages of this book, and how you were shown to be leading her through a very interesting, even tumultuous life at times. And bless this evening in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, well, is this on? No. Okay.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm sorry for being a little bit late. I only assumed that you had one gigantic building, not many gigantic buildings. So I've seen quite a bit of your beautiful community tonight as I roamed around trying to find where dear Dodi was. But I'm honored to be here tonight, and I was very honored to write this book with this amazing lady who I'm privileged to call my friend. She's so much fun, as some of you know, and I just had a wonderful time taking her story and setting it in the context of history. So so what we're going to do tonight is we're just going to chat. We're going to talk, and then I think at the end, I'm not sure, but we'll take questions, right? Of course. Right. So save up your questions, and at the end we can hopefully answer them. So just a little bit of background about myself. I was born and raised in Winnipeg, Manitoba, the coldest city in the world. And so Michigan always feels okay to me. Never feels too cold. It's really, really weird. And so I am also an expat, as Dodi is. And oftentimes, hearing Dodi talk, her accent reminded me a little bit of my Mennonite Opanoma, and they came from Germany. So very similar accent, and my dad was a child in World War II. So to me, it was very interesting to meet Dodi and hear about her story. I was introduced to Dodie by Shirley and Tony Whites, who, Tony is my plant dealer. Call him my dealer. He's a plant man, and I've become a crazy houseplant lady. And anyway, Tony kept telling me, oh, you've got to meet my mother-in-law. She has this amazing story, and he would tell me snippets of it. And it did sound amazing, and it truly is. So eventually it all lined up, and I was able to spend a few months with Dodie and interviewed her.
Yeah.
Well, it took a few months, and then I feel like maybe I started at our December until April, something like that, and I would go once a week and interview her for 1 hour, and that seemed to be, as much as, was really good for getting the best information. And after that, it was, we would get tired and it would be time to go. And then when I was at home, I would take what she told me and I would look up things on the internet. I would read books, and I would find Dodie's story in the pages of history. So, tell me first of all what it was like for you growing up as a child in Indonesia. What are your earliest memories?
Well, I had two wonderful parents, and my grandfathers from both sides were real Dutch, 100% Dutch. Are the Dutch people here?
I don't think so.
Yeah, there are some. But I have two grandfathers, one is from The Hague and one is from Amsterdam. But I had one grandmother, and she is full-blooded Indonesia. And she was always so sweet, like most Indonesian women are, very humble. And she was a good cook. So she taught my mother, I think, no, my father, yeah, something like that. And anyway, so my mother was, 75% Dutch, and my father was 50% Dutch, and here I am, I don't know, I'm half and half, I guess. But anyway,
We figured out 60%.
something like that. But I was brought up the Dutch way, went to Dutch schools, and I spoke Dutch, a little bit of my Indonesian, and I had a hard time with my English language until now, I still do, But I have a daughter, Shirley, and she is my, talker? Translator.
Yeah.
See, that I forgot already. So, I had a mother, and my father was in the army, but my grandfather, both of us were lawyers. But my father he wanted to go in the army, and he became an officer in the army. As a matter of fact, my nephew just passed away, and he was a lieutenant colonel, big deal. Well, anyway, it was really interesting. It was a beautiful life in Indonesia. Everything was free and just gorgeous. So I had no problem until the war came. I was in high school, I think the second year. I was 15 years old. The war came and they took my father away. And so but they put him in a concentration camp. And then he died of that, what do you call that disease?
Dysentery?
Dysentery, yeah, terrible disease.
Well, let me just interrupt you a minute and back up a little bit. So tell us about your dad. I know you missed your dad. And
I miss my dad. I was so close to him. He taught me so much. Until now, I still hear it for me, Don't do this, don't do that. He really taught me a lot, and I'm happy he did.
Now, I know your dad was an itinerant evangelist.
Oh, yeah,
right?
after that, before the war, he was, what do you call it?
Evangelist.
Evangelist, like.
Yeah.
So, and I went with him all over, and we moved to a place, we call it Turan. It's a small place where they're all Islam. but he made a lot of Christian people
Mhm.
of Islam. You know, he had so many people too. I was so proud of him.
Mhm.
You know, and I think that stuck with me. I think
Yeah.
stuck. You know, and I'm happy I had that because when I was in a difficult times, that stayed in my head and
Yeah.
it works
For your whole life.
for my whole life.
Yeah.
I'm 93 years old now and I'm still, help me God, you know.
Yeah. So you just said, "Help me, God," and that was something that your dad,
Taught me.
Taught you,
God
right?
help me, yeah.
when you don't know what to say,
Yeah.
pray the prayer, the very short
Yeah,
prayer,
yeah.
"Help me, God."
And then I was wondering, I married a husband, my husband was in the 80s. And that was not easy, but he was very scientifically, you know, he was a pilot and blah, blah, blah. So, but he was so sick, I would say almost for 7 years or so, when we moved here to Grand Rapids from California. And he always looked down on me and all those things. But I was still telling that prayer, God help me.
Help me.
But
Right.
before he died, he said, God help me. And I was so happy to hear that. And I said, God will help you and he shall help you. And he fell asleep forever.
Wow.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yes. So tell me about the time when when you first saw the Japanese soldiers, and what did you think? Were you frightened? What did you think?
It was very frightening. It was so different. They had funny legs, you know, kind of old legs. Yeah, they do. And they look different. And I said, God, what happened? So then my father was taken away already. And I said, my mom said, okay, you two girls, I have a sister and me, and I have an adopted brother. He was Chinese from adopted parents. So he said, you're not going out anymore. You're going to stay in the house because the Japanese are after women. And they don't care if you're 15 years old or not. So then my mother wrote my aunt a letter. But she lived in another town, another city, like maybe 9 years by train. And so my aunt's friends picked us up. And we went to that little town, Samara. And we couldn't stay outside, we had to stay inside too, but we had a good house. But her husband was more Indonesian than Dutch. So he worked for like GTE, is that the electricity?
Yeah,
Something like that, yeah. So he was a CPA there, so he could work, but he couldn't get outside until we had to go to the concentration camp because I was more Dutch than Indonesian. So my mother was 75% Dutch, and so we had to go, my mother and my sister and I and my brother, even though he was Chinese. But, you know, we were adopted him.
Yeah.
So, and in that concentration camp in the beginning,
Well, first of all, let's talk about the last time that you saw your dad.
Oh, yeah.
What did he say? If I remember correctly, the Japanese soldiers took their prisoners of war
Yeah.
and marched them, and they just happened to march them right in front of you and your mother, and I'm not sure if your brother was there or not,
no,
but your dad asked a Japanese soldier if he could say goodbye, and the Japanese soldier said yes. And then what happened? What did your dad say to your mom?
so he ran to us fast. He said, don't have much time. He said, take care of my 2 diamonds, you know. And what else did he say? I forgot.
Yeah, that's what I remember, is
Oh,
that
okay.
her father said goodbye to his wife and his daughters, and said to his wife, take care of my 2 diamonds, meaning his 2 girls. And that was the last time that you saw your
And that
father.
was the last time he had to run back to the camp. Yeah.
So what ended up happening to your father? You touched on it before.
Okay,
He was taken to this camp,
and
and
they took him to a little island, Ambon, when he built an airport,
Mhm.
and then he died there because of this dysentery.
yeah, it wasn't long at all, and her beloved father died from dysentery, and the conditions, terrible, filthy conditions at the concentration camp. So meanwhile, you and your sister and your mother and Ed, your brother, who was
Yeah.
10, right?
No, he was 9.
Oh, he was 9, okay. And then you were 15,
Mhm.
right? And your sister was younger, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So 1.5 years, 2 years. so
Yeah,
on, like
yeah.
that.
So you were taken to a concentration camp, eventually called Halmahera.
The second one, yeah.
Yes.
The first one was different 9.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell me about the worst of the conditions at Halmahera. What was the worst thing that you had to endure there?
First of all, we don't have much food. We have to work so hard. We are like slaves. We are special. We didn't have any soap. We had nothing. And we had, well, I slept. My mom, I had a small room, maybe from here to there. And my mom slept underneath. They have a bed there, and my mom slept underneath the bed. And my sister, I was always so fragile. I got sick so easy. And then they just two slept underneath that bed, and I slept in that bed. And we were so hungry all the time. So, and I saw how in the kitchen, how do you call it? Kitchen for everyone.
Just the camp kitchen or mess hall or?
Yeah, all, for the whole thing.
Yeah.
So, I saw they caught a dog, and they beat that dog so bad. They were so cruel to that dog. And then when the dog was killed, then they make like a ragu or something, and then we got just a spoon of it and a spoon of rice. That's all we get the whole day. And a little bit bread in the morning, and a little sugar, everything a little bit, just enough that you won't die yet,
So they were definitely near starving, and two of the things that really stood out to me was that one time her mother was very sick, and her and her siblings chased down a bat that was flying around, and they turned it into a soup, just hoping that the broth would nourish their mother. And that was very shocking to me. And the other shocking thing, there were many shocking things, but the two that were the most to me, the other one was that people would beat herons, like the birds that were up in the trees. And they weren't good eating at all. Like nobody eats a heron, but they were starving, and so they would go up in the tree. And her brother was a kid, and he'd go up in the tree and he'd beat the heron
with a stick. Yeah.
with a stick until it fell to the ground, and there would be all these prisoners fighting over the heron that would fall from the tree.
But they're alive. We just put them together.
Yeah.
That's awful. So,
Yeah.
and then I cooked for my mom, and I made her drink the broth of the heron, and then I let out so far, And we had vegetables, and we ate them raw. The Japanese gave us those hot peppers, those red long ones, and they thought they were going to kill us with that, but they didn't kill us. And later on, after the war, I found out that it has a lot of vitamin C in there, just that hot peppers. So we were eating, of the Dutch people don't eat that much hot stuff. But we were really eating with the vegetables and and the broth of the soup and all that. And stole some vegetables in the kitchen.
Yeah. Well, another terrible thing I remember is that there were just so many fleas and that they were scratching all night and that there were so many mosquitoes and I mean, I hate mosquitoes and just to think about them just constantly having no protection from them and just scratching and scratching, it really sounds like hell on earth to me.
It was, yeah.
Mhm.
You then take a shower or a bath or something.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then we don't have any soap, but we had stones from the river, stones is all over them in California and Indonesia. And that was our soap, we just scratch us
Mhm.
to clean us.
So after the Allies won the war and you were released from concentration camp, you were still in a lot of danger.
What a relief that was, we saw those American airplanes, you know, oh, we were so happy. But so many people died because we could eat a lot then. They went to restaurants, they were free. Some of them died in the restaurants on different food. Yeah. And
Yeah, I mean, what you said was that, so the Americans were dropping care packages, food packages, or the Allies, I should say, and some people like gorged themselves and they literally died because their bodies went into shock from eating after having nearly starved. But even though the war was over, this was really part 2 of 3 times when Dodie almost died. And so the end of the war was the beginning of another very dangerous phase in her life. And that was, you were in danger because of the Indonesian extremists.
Yes. Then you see, the Dutchies lost Indonesia. So here we are, the Dutch Indonesian, we call ourselves Indos, that is mixed from Dutch and Indonesian. And the Indonesian wants their country, they want freedom, you know. But the Dutch, they were fighting and everything else. And so they tried to kill us too, because we had a choice, are you Dutch or Indonesian? Of course, we were more Dutch than Indonesian, so I couldn't live like an Indonesian woman, or none of us, you know. So I said, well, we were Dutch, and then they start fighting us, killing us, the Dutchans. But like I said, God helped me.
What struck me was that the 2 bloodlines in Dodie's very body were fighting against each other, trying to kill each other. And so the Dutch lost and they were no longer over Indonesia. And the Indonesian extremists then were very violent and, you know, thousands upon thousands of people were slaughtered. And eventually Dodie met her first husband and had...
I have to Thailand first.
Pardon me?
I have to go to Thailand first.
Would you want to go to Thailand? Okay. I was just hitting the high points. We can go to Thailand. All right, let's go to Thailand.
Okay, so we went out there and I met this English man.
Oh, yeah, let's talk about him. That was my favorite part of the book. What was his name?
His name was Jack Henderson, I never forgot.
She never forgot. No,
Yeah.
no.
So, yeah, and we have the Red Cross, and we get money from the Red Cross because my father was in the army down there. And I have a friend, and her name was Steen. So her and I went to the Red Cross, and there were English soldiers there. And of course we were talking, and I don't know, I don't talk English not much, but hello, how about you, you know? So he said, address, so we give her our address, and they come and see us. And then he fell in love with me, and I thought I was in love. And I was 18 years old then, and he said, I cannot marry you. I said, why not? Well, because you're a mixed race, and England doesn't allow that. But I was young, I didn't care that much,
It's easy come, easy go.
So I went with Steve, and then the Red Cross, the one that were in concentration camp, could go to Australia, emigrate for a while, not emigrate, just for a while, go to Australia or to Borneo or to Thailand. Well, my mom was a prisoner again from the extremists. I was with my aunt and my sister and my grandma. I said, well, Steve, why don't we go to Thailand? So we went to Thailand. What a beautiful country. And they were so friendly to us, I had a wonderful time in Thailand.
And was the captain of the ship happy with you when you and Steve took off for the entire night and no one could find you?
Yeah. No, before that we had to stay in the big hall, or how you call it. We slept on the floor, but that's okay. We were young, we didn't care. So we didn't come home. We were dancing the whole night. Because, we love to dance. My sister and I love to dance. I was 18 and a half, I think, or 18, something like that. So,
yeah, and this captain who was responsible for these girls, they were not where they were supposed to be. They were supposed to be, sleeping on the floor of this building or whatever where all the passengers from the ship had gotten off. The passengers had gotten off the ship. They were supposed to sleep overnight in this building. But Dodie and Steen went dancing all night.
Can you imagine that?
Got in a little bit of hot water with the captain,
We were away, And the captain said, where is that, Theodora and Steen? So I come to the office, oh my God, I thought. And he said, you were two naughty girls and you don't get any money. I said, well, we have to live. I need some money, But there's an older captain, and we were nice and young. I said, wait, Steve, I'll show you what to do. So I sat on the slab, and I said, Captain, we are such so poor people. Have pity for us,
She found a way to get her money, basically.
He said, okay, you get your money, but I'm going to ship you by train to a real small place in Thailand. We didn't care, we didn't know, and so we were.
Well, he wanted to get them out of Bangkok, where there were many temptations.
So beautiful.
And so the punishment really was to send these two girls to a very remote area where they couldn't possibly get into trouble.
But they had so much fun, and then.
Was that night in Bangkok, was it worth it?
Yeah.
It was definitely worth
And
it.
then we went to that Nakampaton, to that small town, and then we got, what do you call a truck from the military, the Dutch military were there, and it was so high I couldn't jump. So he was a nice young man, and he put his arm out, so I jumped in his arm, and that was my husband. So he became my husband.
Yes. So the train pulls in, or the trucks pull in. There's little tiny Theodora. There's a long way between the truck and the ground. And there's a soldier who offers to lift her and set her on the ground. And that became her first husband.
And that's all my kids sitting in the back.
And the father of a multitude of children. And so she didn't get into trouble, but she did immediately find a husband. So, all right. So let's talk about. Let's fast forward a little bit. And so you married your husband
in Indonesia. We had to go back because he was abused by the Japanese, and they beat his thigh with the bayonet, And,
Her first husband had been, you know that movie, Bridge Over the River?
Yeah, he worked there.
That's where her first husband had been stationed, building that
Yeah, that bridge.
bridge. So he had suffered a bayonet to the leg, and which bothered him for his whole life, I
Oh,
think,
for
right?
his whole life.
Yeah. Mhm. So you got married, and then you had your first son,
My oldest son, yeah.
your oldest son. And what was his name?
Errol, from Errol Flynn. Can
Right.
you imagine? I saw the movie Errol Flynn, and I
Yes.
thought, oh, that's a beautiful guy.
You can see why I enjoyed myself, right? She was always saying things that made me go, what?
Errol Flynn. He was so handsome, wasn't he? Huh?
Yeah, I would have to look him up. But
So young.
she named all her children after movie stars. So that was kind of a fun fact. So she had her son Errol. Do you want to talk a little bit about Errol and his birth?
Well, oh yeah, first of all, my husband Dan was having a meeting with his soldiers, and he promised me to take me out, you know, in this dangerous time then. And he couldn't because he had to have a meeting because he was a sergeant major. I hated that, so I took I had slippers, this one warm, hot in Indonesia. And I was walking, and then across the street from our house, there is those high grass, how do you call it? We call it alam-alam.
Just tall grass,
Yeah,
kind of jungly, I think.
Yeah. And I was walking all by myself, it was kind of almost dark, and there was a snake, a poison snake with those rings, and he bit me on my toe, and then right away I get a lump right here on my leg. So I went home and I said to my husband, bring me to the hospital, because I'm going to die. So they took me to the hospital right away, and they said, well, you know, it's a good thing you came early, because you're really going to die. So they gave me the injection against the poison, I guess. But he said, your son will be born too early. I was 8 months pregnant when my son was born. And then when he was grown up, he was mental, how you call it,
Handicap.
Yeah,
what?
mentally handicapped.
Yeah, mentally
Yeah.
handicapped.
Yeah,
So,
because of his,
birth too young,
white.
yeah.
I mean, today and here in these hospitals and with our modern medicine, he would have been fine. They would have, but
Those days after the war, you know.
yeah, it was he was born too early, and there was nothing they could do about that.
Right.
So, so you had Errol, and then you had
Jeffrey
Jeffrey.
Hunter.
after Jeffrey Hunter, and then you had Shirley. She's here today.
She's right there.
There she is. Everyone look at her. Named after Shirley Temple. So Jody was a young mom with 3 little ones, and they were still living in dangerous Indonesia, where anyone with Dutch blood had a target on their backs. And tell me about the letter that you got
Oh, yeah.
one day.
My husband Dan was still the sergeant major. And I got a letter, and some Islam people came to the house and said, you have to get out because you're more Dutch. He said, if you don't get out, I'll kill you, because as a matter of fact, they say, we have some trees for you guys already to hang you there. I was so scared. I have not only one letter, more than one. So I said, I'm going to the Dutch consul, because I'm Dutch, you know. So I went to the Dutch consul with some friends, because they have something to do too. And it took us 12 hours by train, traveling by train, 12 hours. So went to the council and he said, Mrs. Bodine, then, you go home and in 4 days you pack what you can and we ship you to a town, Jakarta now, it was Batavia then, and you stay there in the camp for a month and we take care of you and because we ship you to the Netherlands. Okay, that's what we did. And here they came, the MP came, MP car, you know, a jeep, and what can you do in 4 days? So we left everything there, and we had servants then, you know. In Indonesia, lots of people had servants. So I said to the servants, take everything you want, because I had to leave you. They were crying and everything. So the MP came and took us to the harbor in Surabaya, and from there we went with a boat, not a ship, a boat, really a boat. And they took us to Jakarta, so the soldiers and everything, they took care of us, and we stayed there for a month. With how many kids? We have three.
3 kids.
Three
Yeah.
kids, and then from there we went on the ship and went to the Netherlands. It took us a whole month.
So this part of the book kind of ushers in part 3 of Dodi's, the dangers that Dodi faced, and the 3 times in her life where she almost died. And so the first time was concentration camp. The second time was being in danger from Indonesian extremists. And what she didn't mention is when the family fled with the military police, they were shooting after them. I mean, they weren't just leisurely driving away. They were fleeing and being shot at.
Yeah.
So the danger was very real. And finally then, you would think Dodi and her family were out of danger because they were in the Netherlands, which they thought of as their mother country, and they were safe. There was no war. There was, it was what, 1950? 51. Thank you, Shirley.
And then
Shirley
Roy was
Temple.
born.
What?
Roy was born.
Yes, and then Roy was born. He's here as well.
Named after Roy Rogers.
Roy Rogers. There he is. Okay. So she's a young mother with 4 children. And then after some, struggles with getting settled in the Netherlands that we won't get into, but it's all in the book. Dodi and her family were in their home on the night of, was it February?
When was that flood?
February 1953.
February 1953. Maybe some of you know what's coming next. They were in their homes, or their home, I should say.
The dike broke.
When suddenly there was a banging on the door, and your husband rushed downstairs, right?
No, we were all upstairs.
Okay, but to answer the door. 'cause
Oh,
there was
yeah, he
someone-
answered the door.
Yeah. So they went to the door, and it was their neighbor who said that the dikes broke, the dam burst. Basically, the ocean was coming for them. And it was the Great Dutch Flood of 1953, which some of you may be aware of. So, for a 3rd time, Dodi almost died.
We all
And-
did, yeah.
You told me, which was very striking to me, that was the most scared she's ever been. And why
Yeah.
was that the scariest moment of your life?
Because we were drowning and everything. So
The water's rising, rising,
even until
rising.
upstairs when we in our bedrooms.
Yeah.
So we had to go to the attic.
And what did you have to do with your children to keep them safe?
Well, I took all this blanket and put it to the attic, and then when my mother-in-law, she was old, I thought she was old, she was only 17 years old.
Spring chicken. Yeah.
She said, let me die. So, you know, we should then.
Yeah, let's talk about what happened with the mother-in-law.
Yeah, first
This
the
is a
water
good
went
story.
down, the water went down, right? How do you call it, ebb? Tide and ebb?
Okay,
What
yeah.
is it? Tide? Ebb?
Tide.
Oh, tide.
Well, I
Went
guess,
down.
yeah, the water started to recede.
Yeah, you see,
Yeah,
So
and your
I-
mother-in-law was really scared, right?
yeah, first I bundled my kids up in the blanket, I took all the blankets and threw them in the boat from my window.
Yeah. So she literally dropped her baby, Roy.
Yeah.
On his head.
From the boat,
I didn't say that.
yeah, from
It
the
was
window.
never said if you hit the edge of the boat or anything.
From the window in the boat, you know, and all my little kids, of course, you know.
She dropped her kids one by one out of the attic window into a rescue boat alone.
And then my mother-in-law, that's the one who said, let me die, let me die. So her son, my husband then, he said, if you don't jump in that boat, I'm going to hit you on your head. Yes, and he was planning to. And then she said she went first with her body out of the window. I said to Mom, you cannot do that. You have to sit down on the window sill to go in the boat and jump in the boat. So finally, she was a tall woman. She finally did that. So I thought I'd give her a push from the back.
She pushed her mother-in-law out of the window. So, but she insists that she really loved her mother-in-law. Who's not trying to kill her.
She had to jump. Then I jumped, and then my ex-husband, my husband jumped after that. And then they took us to a higher place, Foods. And there was Doris from Doris Day, Glenn from Glenn Miller, he's right here. And Doris Day.
So, yeah, just skipping ahead a little bit. So, the family survived the Great Dutch Flood.
Yeah,
But I think 1,800 people died that night.
yeah.
So,
That was really scary.
if I can remember the number. Tony, can you remember?
Yeah, that's about right.
Okay, thank you, Tony.
A lot more cows died though.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
saw them, you know, just going and in my windows, all the cars.
Yeah, there were animals just floating and,
There was a baby in a plastic bed, or what is that? I don't know what it is.
Crib?
So it was stuck in the thumb, and the parents were dead.
yeah.
We went to
horrible
a church,
case.
yeah, we went to a church, there was a higher crowd. So then we shipped us by a truck to another city, school, because I was living in Salem.
So, so Dodi had now survived concentration camp, Indonesian extremists, and the Great Dutch Flood.
And Japanese war.
Well, yeah, that was the concentration camp. Yeah, yeah. So she had been through, how old were you in 1953?
I don't know, I have to figure it out.
Someone do the math. 26 you were born, right?
Yes.
Okay. So,
In their 20s.
27.
oh my goodness. So she was 27 years old and she had almost died in 3 separate, tragedies or catastrophes or wars. So this is a woman who's been through quite a bit, but in some ways the worst was yet to come. Is that true? Yeah. Do you want to talk about it or?
And you go ahead.
Okay, all right. Well, it's all in the book.
Yeah, I never read it.
That's right. We don't want to give away everything in the book. But Dodi and her family eventually,
I have another youngest daughter that was born here in the United
yes,
States.
we'll get there. So in the Netherlands still, Glenn was born, as she said, named after Glenn Miller. And Glenn is here. And then Doris, after Doris Day, she is here as well. So at this point, okay, I've lost track of how many kids you have. 6. You had 6
I
of
had
them.
7 then with Arrow. No, 6.
No, you had 6 at
yeah,
that
I
point.
had 6.
So she had 6 children at that point. And the opportunity arose for the family to immigrate to the United States. And the way that I understood it was that in post-war Netherlands, there weren't many jobs. There were a lot of people that wanted to live there, and not enough jobs and not enough opportunity. So they did what millions of people have done, and they wanted to come to the New World to seek a better future for themselves, and maybe more prosperous future. So you immigrated to the United States.
Grand Rapids, we came to Grand Rapids, believe it or not.
Yes.
After all that.
Yes, and I believe they were sponsored by Third Reformed Church, right?
Yes.
Okay. So they were sponsored by Third Reformed Church, and then this was a new chapter in Dodie's life.
Yeah.
And at the same time, her marriage
I was
was,
in Holland when I married her.
yes. So her marriage was already hanging by a string by the time they came over on the boat. But her and her husband would end up having one more child who was born in the United States, Irene. And who is Irene named after?
That's the Dutch princess,
Oh,
Irene.
okay. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. Beautiful. All right, so Dodie had 7 children. Her and her husband eventually divorced, not long after you got to the United States.
Right.
Right. So then there was a whole new chapter of trying to learn English, trying to settle into the United States. She was trained in the beauty business.
Yes, I was a beautiful Christian lady. Her name is Hazel.
Hazel.
From Beauty Rama Salon. I don't know if anyone knows Beauty Rama Salon. I worked for her as a servant. Here I came from a nice family. And I have to be a servant with a black uniform with a white apron. I felt so belittled, but I thought, no, I have to, because she was well-to-do and she owns a beauty salon and a beauty school. So she asked me if I want to go to beauty school. I said, yes, of course. So she trained me all the way. And I've been a beauty hairdresser since.
Yeah, so Dodie was trained in the beauty business, which she absolutely loved, which is a positive, but she ended up losing custody of her children, and that was devastating. And she remarried and moved to California,
And I
and
remarried a real Hollander, a Dutchman,
yes,
for 52 years.
yes, she was married for 52 years, and here we are.
Yeah,
And I'm skipping over a lot, but
and it's all in the book.
it's all in the I have no idea what the time frame is that we've been talking, so, but I think we should probably wrap it up, and we've hit the high points and hopefully tantalized you all, and it really is, I think, just a really fascinating story of one woman's just resilience in the face of so many hardships and tragedies, and and she came through it all with a sense of humor, that's for sure,
Has to.
and with her faith intact. And that to me is very inspiring, how she never lost her faith.
It's all in this book, I think, in the last page.
There's also a recipe in there.
Was that the soup we
Yeah,
had
can
today?
you see it?
Yes.
Oh, is it? Okay, wonderful. Yeah.
Just ask the girl whose name means gift of God.
Theodora.
Theodora.
Yeah. Oh, okay, okay, yeah.
Just
So,
ask me, Theodora.
so to this day though, you still, she has a picture of her father framed by her bed.
A real big one, yeah.
Yeah. So what do you still hold on to when you think about your father?
But I'm glad he's a good Christian,
Yeah.
and he always said, God help me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I
And-
have a lot of people to bring to church because of that word, God help me.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad I can do it, that I'm able to. Even if they don't believe at the end, look at my husband.
So, is there anything else that you'd like to
No,
tell the people about your book?
they have to, I have a lot of books there, and owning them. My Holland, first son-in-law, he's from Holland, from the Netherlands. So,
Well, I learned a lot about history in writing the book, and I think as a reader you will learn a lot about history as well, and you will get to know this amazing woman who lives right in your midst. So thank you for listening to Dodie share her story.
I am wondering if we can take a few questions. Let's
Yeah,
spend 5
let's do
minutes.
that.
Any questions? Go ahead, raise your hand.
What nationality was
I'll repeat the
her
question.
husband?
What
Her first
nationality?
husband
he's a real Dutchman.
No.
He was born and raised in Amsterdam.
Your first husband or her
Oh,
first
yeah.
husband or
Oh, my first,
The
same,
first husband,
same like I am, Dutch,
yeah,
Dutch
Dutch
Indonesian.
the combination.
Yes, the combination. Yeah.
But she says he was born in Amsterdam?
No, that was her second
Oh,
husband.
second, yeah,
Yeah.
the first one was
Yeah.
Indonesian. But he was in the Dutch army, the first husband was.
Dutch Indonesian,
Dutch
yeah.
Dutch Indonesian, the Dutch army.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, go ahead.
At what point did you get your children back?
Yeah, that's what I heard.
At what point did you get your children back?
When was this, you guys?
I was 21,
When our father passed away,
1975.
our father passed away, and our stepmother did not want us at the funeral. And our names were not on the obituary. So, one of my mom's
Wait a minute, you're gonna have to repeat that. Let's tell it for everybody.
sons,
Our father passed away, and our stepmother didn't like any of my dad's kids. We were all kicked out of the house when we were graduated from high school, or sooner. So there was a real discontent with our stepmother. Well, when our father passed away, our stepmother didn't put her 3 sons in the obituary. So our mother thought we died in the Vietnam War. So she called, one of the friends from Grand Rapids sent the obituary, said, I think this was your ex-husband. And then my mom called her and said, where's my sons? She goes, I don't know. So she looked in the Grand Rapids phone book and saw all of our names. And so she called. After high school, I went to LA looking for her. And I was in LA and she was in San Francisco. I don't know if you remember the phone books. If you've ever been to LA, the phone books were there's 2 of them, about this big. And I don't even know if I had the right last name. Kleisma was her new married name. And so my mom called her friend, and then they talked, and then she called my oldest brother Jeff, who lives in Florida right now in Clearwater. And then Jeff's wife, Sue, called Cheryl and I, my wife, and said, guess who called? We go, I don't know. So then she said, your mom called. And I was 4 years old when my mom and dad got a divorce. Is that about right, guys?
Yeah.
Shirley was 9, Roy was 7,
Doris was a
and
baby.
Doris was just a baby, and Irene was, how old was Irene? Maybe 1 year old or something?
No, she
That's
was
right.
younger than me.
So she was, my dad and my stepmother were in cahoots on the divorce papers that she was an unfit mother. My mother's
I thought
English.
unfit, well, unfit, I mean, I was always sickly. I was very delicate, And then somebody came with a letter and said, you're an unfit mother. Well, then what can I do? I'm unfit. I couldn't speak English. So I had to get out of the house. And then later, after so many years, Shirley asked me, do you know what unfit is? I said, yeah, I was always sickly. She said, it's different. Oh yeah? I thought it was my body is unfit. And then, but like I said, that's a God.
So she moved, I think she came that next weekend from when we first talked. What was it? Right? Roy and I, you and I picked her up at the Detroit airport with her husband.
So we were what, about 24?
Yeah.
24,
And
26.
Roy said, you don't recognize me. I said, I always recognize my kids after so many years. And he was at the airport and he was looking around. I was standing there and I said, hey Roy, that's not fair, that's not fair.
I didn't contact
Anyone else have a question? One more. Okay.
One more question, where is it?
I have a comment.
Right here.
Right there.
Okay, you can speak loud enough, can you? I'll repeat it.
When did Japan invade Indonesia? When were you sent to the concentration camp?
Oh, for God.
And when were you in Thailand? What year were you in
After
Thailand?
the war, yeah, after the
What
war,
year?
after.
Once the years of the
When-
Japanese
when-
invasion was probably 42, perhaps, I don't know.
1942.
That sounds
And
right.
then you went to the concentration camp, and you were there 3 years or 2 years?
3.5 years.
3.5 years, so right away, 42 to 45. And then you went to Thailand almost right away?
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
All right, yep.
I have the Spiegel magazine of the flood of '53. It has all those pictures in there.
Wow, yeah, so to actually live the flood is astounding.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Because I remember being in Amsterdam and I lived on a high-rise building, and I always joked, I always thought, I'm on the 12th floor. I'm above the flood level, so if the dikes break, I will be all right. Unless I'm down on my bike on the ground, But see, the waters rose so high, right to the
It's
top.
scary.
Terrifying, amazing.
It's terrifying.
So she, Nancy said she had Der Spiegel magazine with all the pictures and the full story of the 1953
From
flood.
Finland.
Yeah,
From Finland.
Zeeland, yeah, Zeeland was the most. And there were, I think I just read the statistic that 30,000 cows died.
I saw the cows driving in front of the
Yeah,
window.
cows everywhere.
1,800 died.
And they built massive flood works, if you've ever been to the Netherlands, the Delta Works and storm surges. And London and England also got affected, and they built storm surges by the River Thames, by the ocean there. They've always talked to the Dutch about building one by New York City, but it was too expensive before Superstorm Sandy. I don't know if it ever will. Okay, thank you very much. We have goodies here. There's, you can form lines on each side. The book table is here. Son is going to help sell the books, I think 15. What's the price?
Tony, where are you? That's
Right here,
Tony.
right here.
What's the going price?
There's 17, 2 for 30.
17, 2 for 30. Theodora is the name of the book.
Christmas
There.
is coming.
They're all signed, right? Correctly? Yes, okay. Yeah, thank you all for coming, and please show your appreciation.